Subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified about the highlights of India's smartest podcast, The Ranveer Show. This is TRS Clips. So Jaiswal, what is DeFi?
In very simple language, you make money by lending money to someone. You get paid interest on it. DeFi is just that. You're removing the middleman, getting the borrower and lender together and helping that transaction happen. Yeah.
DeFi शब्द को expand कीजिए जैसे.
Oh, DeFi is decentralized finance, जिसमें कोई बीच का बंदा नहीं है. ये decentralized finance है. जो platform है, वो mediator है. जिस पे there are borrowers and lenders coming and they're basically doing the transaction.
You from your eyes of being an econ student, how does this look?
This looks insane, amazing because you're making the system transparent, right?
Yeah.
So something like microfinance is a great example of what he was talking about, right? Like if microfinance, small loans given out to people, if it's organized, automated through a blockchain-based system, I can give money on loan to someone else and the system will ensure that it's going to the right place, coming back on time and all of that. Or like there's tokenization for real estate nowadays.
Yeah.
Smart contracts. Like I don't want to sit and deal with all these papers. The registry of properties in blockchain, right? So the record gets updated because of that. So it's like that's what the basic system on which we work is getting updated. It's like that.
Anything else you all want to add about this? Or?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think we can actually talk about like specific topics, but it'll become like tangents.
What does this mean for, say, a student in a final year who's figuring out finances in life? What does that person need to know about DeFi? And what do they need to study like right now?
Got it. So DeFi is basically like removing the middlemen, right? Which are more often than not banks, right?
Yeah.
And I think as a person who is just graduating, I would want to study the newer technologies which are coming in because they might be the future. In college, you will learn about what are the infrastructures available today, but what's coming in tomorrow is going to be very, very critical. I'll give you an example, right? A very good friend of mine, Raphael, is one of the smartest guys I know. He's working on this company called TrueFi, right? And what TrueFi is trying to do, I hope I explain this right, otherwise I don't want to disappoint him. No. But what TrueFi does is that they're basically building a centralized place where they will have credit scores of everybody. Today we have, for example, in India, you use CIBIL score, right? Similarly, on the blockchain, people are borrowing and they are, lending money. Based on how good you are in paying back, they are creating a credit score, which is accessible by all the other apps, not just lending, all the other apps. So basically, everyone's credit is getting created on a blockchain which can be shared by everyone, which is very, very powerful, right?
But will they have names like Yash Talreja credit so much, Ranveer credit so much?
Yeah, so I think like identities in sort of in the crypto world is like a sort of whole different topic. So right now they don't have names; they have wallet addresses, right?
Got it.
So you can put a name to it. You can sort of stay anonymous. So that's how it works.
It's basically publicly ranking you based on how good you are at the game of money.
Okay. Absolute. I mean, how reliable you are. What is credit based on? Essentially, it's based on your behavior in history, right? You build up a credit score based on that.
I have an analogy, but I don't know how like appropriate it is. But basically, torrents, right?
Yeah.
So torrents is like P2P kind of thing, right? Someone uploads a file, they seed it to 10 people, they seed it again, and you have a ratio कि मैंने इतना download किया and I've like uploaded so much.
Yeah.
So it's kind of similar to that. Think of it like P2P lending for decentralized finance kind of, okay?
Yeah.
Like I am lending to someone else, there's no intermediary because the system is automated. So it's kept track कि मैंने इतना दिया, I've got so much interest and all of that is meant.
And nothing over there can ever get lost because all that data is on the blockchain.
Is the value of that startup in the data? When people say data is the new oil, therefore that startup has created this bank of data.
Yeah.
But then how is this startup, Raphael startup, making money in terms of just by holding data? Because you said that the data is publicly available to everyone else. So how do they make money themselves?
No, of course, there are multiple ways. Like there are platforms who charge like a fee by themselves, which is of course like not as sort of high or stuff like that. So there are multiple ways through which these platforms make money for facilitating this, right? They get rewarded.
Like you said, data is oil. Recently I spoke to someone who had made an AI for real estate, right? And the major collection, like this company called Anarok, they're one of India's largest residential sales marketing companies. So we spoke to Mr. Sunil Mishra, who built their AI. And it basically what he was talking about is that the first process was collecting consumer and lead data for so many years to build that database. And why that database was valuable is that when they started writing these algorithms to decide which leads are good and all of that, they could train it on this data. And they had all this data to work off of. Right? So they had to make the database, and why that database was valuable is it trained their algorithm. And now they can say which lead is good. He's Mr. Salesperson, concentrate on this guy. He has a good chance of buying.
Got it.
Another great product, Cred. They said we will serve top 1% of, Indian economy, right? Those are our customers. And they said this is an app to pay credit card bills, So when you pay credit card bills on Cred, guess what do they have?
Your data.
Yeah. How credible you are. And when they have that, they can build like 10,000 projects on top of it. They can start lending you. They can start, multiple other things.
I believe Kunal Shah said this publicly. He said that we're creating a community of highly reliable people, and that is the actual product.
Yeah.
So kal jaake, they can turn Cred into anything if they have retained users and data on those retained users. They can say, oh, we're e-commerce for like luxury products.
Yes.
And instead of going to your local fancy mall and buying it, why don't you buy it off Cred?
Exactly.
So once you have data, you get to mold your business in any form that you wish. Coming back to DeFi, when we're saying decentralized finance and when we're saying, okay, banks might get redundant. So could you give me sort of an actual product picture of what a DeFi application would be in order to replace banks? Like if I say, okay, I don't want to work with the existing banks right now. I want to do my banking on a DeFi based product. What would that look like? Like what does that include? Or does it already exist?
Yeah, it definitely does. So basically banks make money by lending, right? And that's like a big portion of how banks make money. On DeFi platforms, you can just go, you can start lending there. And borrowers will pay you based on whatever credibility they have, and if there are losses, it basically gets distributed amongst all the lenders, so there is lesser risk and stuff like that, right? Another thing which is making money off money, right? So this concept of staking on the DeFi platform. Staking is nothing but validating transactions, right? So you can, if let's say I have X amount of ETH, I can go on DeFi platforms and I can stake those ETHs, and I'll get certain interest rate on my ETH, right? And all that money is doing is acting as a validator on different transactions, and I'm making my interest, right? So I think, and also just a big thing which I think a lot of people, who are like Web 2 people who sort of don't believe in Web 3, or I get both the sides. Blockchain does not necessarily make everything more efficient, right? Decentralization is highly inefficient, right? You need centralization in a lot of things. I agree. But one of the things which people often miss is that this has no end. People can keep building on top of it, right? So what it's going to look like 5 years later, nobody knows. Yeah. People will keep trying things and they'll keep trying to make sense. And
what do you mean this has no end versus a system which has an end in terms of what? Like the systems we see in the world right now, like the banks, there's a limit to their capabilities. So you're saying that these decentralized systems, you can be creative and come up with new solutions for problems.
Exactly. And you can also be creative in a centralized way, but the power also gets centralized, right? So all I'm saying is that the inefficiencies exist in the system, but those inefficiencies won't stay forever. So it's not a fair comparison to compare the existing system to this system, because this system is just 5 years old. Existing systems, decades, right?
And even for money, the existing system's like a pyramid, right? Like you keep going up in the pyramid. Even banks get their money from a central bank.
Yeah.
Right? Central banks deal with each other. It's based on that. So it like eventually it comes down to just these reserves and banks like at the top of this system. And therefore it's centralized because they are the ones controlling the supply and printing of money. So here, now the system is opened up to anyone who can take it where, again, like that's we don't know.
Like, for example, if I have to ask you that, Ranveer's life is going to be controlled by this one power, would you prefer that one power to be that one person who says, you'll have to do whatever I say? Or would you prefer that one power to be thousands of people and you'll say that, okay, whatever the community says, I'll do, because a few people might be corrupt, but corrupting thousands is harder, right? So I think that's the fundamental difference here.
Yeah.